I need to be honest with you. Something really strange is happening in the prepping world right now. While everyone's fighting over the same canned goods and freeze-dried meals, there are 17 foods that experienced preppers are quietly hoarding and never posting about online. And I'm talking about foods that will be completely impossible to find when the 2026 shortage hits. These aren't your typical prepper staples. Number 12 on this list costs less than $1 per pound and can literally feed your family for months. But I've never seen a single prepper influencer mention it. And when I tell you about number 5, you're going to kick yourself for not thinking of it sooner. It's been sitting in pharmacies this whole time, completely ignored. If you want to stay ahead of what's coming, hit that subscribe button right now, because I'm about to share information that could save your family when everyone else is panicking. Let me tell you what changed my entire approach to prepping. 3 years ago, I attended a survival expo. Every vendor was selling the exact same stuff. Everyone was talking about the exact same foods. And that's when it hit me. If we're all stockpiling identical items, what happens when a real crisis hits? Those items vanish first. So I started researching foods that nobody talks about, foods that our grandparents relied on, foods that other cultures have used for centuries. And what I discovered completely changed my stockpile. Let me share these 17 foods with you. Food number 1 is Blackstrap molasses. This first one is hiding in the baking aisle, and it's probably the most underrated survival food on the planet. Blackstrap molasses. I know it sounds old-fashioned, but listen to what makes this incredible. This stuff is basically concentrated nutrition in liquid form. 1 tablespoon contains 20% of your daily iron, significant calcium, magnesium, and potassium. But here's what makes it survival gold. Unlike regular sugar or honey, Blackstrap molasses actually provides minerals your body desperately needs during stress. I learned about this from an old farmer who told me that during the Depression, families would give children a spoonful every morning to prevent anemia and keep their energy up when food was scarce. The shelf life is virtually unlimited. I've got a jar that's been in my pantry for 5 years, and it's still perfect. It doesn't go bad because the sugar content is too high for bacteria to survive. Here's the survival application. When you're eating a limited diet from your stockpile, mineral deficiencies hit fast. You get weak, tired, your thinking gets foggy. 1 tablespoon of Blackstrap molasses daily prevents that. I add it to oatmeal, stir it into coffee, or mix it with hot water for an instant energy drink. A 1-gallon jug costs about $25 and will last 1 person over a year. Compare that to expensive vitamin supplements that lose potency over time. And here's something wild. During the last major supply chain disruption, I checked every store in my area. Blackstrap molasses was fully stocked everywhere. Nobody was touching it. Food number 2 is canned oysters. Number 2 is going to surprise you because most preppers never consider seafood beyond tuna. Canned oysters. Before you skip this, let me tell you why this might be the smartest prep food for your money. Oysters are absolutely loaded with zinc. 1 tiny can contains more zinc than most people get in an entire week, and zinc is critical for your immune system. In a collapse scenario where medical care is limited, keeping your immune system strong is literally life or death. But here's what makes canned oysters genius. They're packed in oil, which means you're getting the oysters plus that valuable fat for cooking. The oil doesn't go rancid because the can is sealed. I started buying these after reading about Navy submarine crews. They specifically stock oysters because of the nutritional density and the morale factor. When you've been eating basic rations for weeks, having something that feels like a delicacy changes everything psychologically. The shelf life is 3 to 5 years, sometimes longer. I've got cans in my rotation that are 3 years old and still taste fresh. Here's how I use them. Chop them up and add them to rice for a complete meal. Drain the oil and use it for cooking while eating the oysters straight. Mix them into pasta with some of that nutritional yeast I mentioned. The price is right too. You can find canned oysters for about $3 per can during sales. Each can provides serious protein, healthy fats, and those critical minerals. I keep about 40 cans in my stockpile. That's less than $120 for a food that provides more nutrition per ounce than almost anything else you can store. And during shortages, while everyone's fighting over chicken and beef, canned oysters sit completely ignored on shelves. Food number 3 is dried lentils, but the specific type matters. All right, number 3. You might think you know this one, but stay with me because there's a specific variety that changes everything. Red lentils, not green, not brown, specifically red lentils. Here's why this distinction matters. Red lentils cook in 15 minutes without soaking. Every other bean or lentil requires soaking for hours or long cooking times that waste fuel. But red lentils go from dry to fully cooked in 15 minutes. In a fuel-scarce situation, this is massive. I discovered this during a camping trip where we were trying to conserve propane. I brought regular beans and they were taking forever to cook. My friend who'd spent time in India pulled out red lentils and we had a hot meal in under 20 minutes. Total game changer. The nutrition profile is incredible. Red lentils are about 25% protein, loaded with fiber, and they contain folate, which is critical for cell repair and mental health. But here's the secret that makes these perfect for preppers. Red lentils break down when cooked, turning into this thick, creamy texture. That means you can use them to thicken soups and make them heartier without adding anything else. 1 cup of dried red lentils costs about 50 cents and makes enough food to feed 4 people. The cost per meal is insane compared to freeze-dried options. I keep 50 pounds in food-grade buckets. When stored with oxygen absorbers, they last 10 to 15 years easily. That's 50 pounds for about $40 total. Here's my go-to recipe during power outages. Boil red lentils with a bouillon cube and whatever dried vegetables you have. In 15 minutes, you've got this rich, warming stew that feels like comfort food. The psychological impact of hot, satisfying food during a crisis cannot be overstated. Food number 4 is pharmaceutical-grade Dextrose tablets. Number 4 is something you've probably never considered, but it could save your life or someone in your family. Pharmaceutical-grade Dextrose tablets, sometimes called glucose tablets. You find these in the diabetes section of pharmacies. Here's why preppers should care about this. Dextrose is pure glucose, the exact form of sugar your brain runs on. In a high-stress survival situation, your brain is burning through glucose at an accelerated rate. When glucose drops too low, you can't think clearly, you make bad decisions, and in extreme cases, you can pass out. These tablets provide instant energy that hits your bloodstream in about 5 minutes. I learned about this from a paramedic friend who carries them for emergencies. He told me a story about a disaster response where people were so stressed and hadn't eaten that they were literally unable to make simple decisions. A couple glucose tablets and they were functional again within minutes. The shelf life is 2 to 3 years, and they take up almost no space. A bottle of 50 tablets is about $6. Each tablet provides 4 grams of pure glucose. Here's the survival application. If someone in your group is going into shock, glucose tablets can help stabilize them. If you need to pull an all-night security watch and you're fading, glucose tablets keep you alert. If a child is melting down from hunger and you need 10 minutes before a meal is ready, glucose tablets stop the crisis. I keep 10 bottles in my medical supplies. That's about $60 for 500 doses of instant energy. This isn't about everyday nutrition. This is about emergency intervention, when someone's blood sugar crashes and you need them functional immediately. Food number 5 is canned butter. Number 5, and I'm not talking about that expensive freeze-dried butter powder. I'm talking about actual canned butter. This stuff exists, and it's incredible. Real butter, sealed in cans, shelf-stable for years. I discovered canned butter through the prepping communities in New Zealand and Australia where it's more common. The brand Red Feather is the most known, but there are others. Here's what makes this brilliant. It's real butter with the full fat content and real flavor, not some powder you have to reconstitute. The shelf life is officially 2 years, but people have tested cans that are 5 years old and they're still perfect. In a crisis situation where you're eating bland food, real butter makes everything better. Rice with butter is satisfying. Vegetables with butter taste good. Bread with butter feels like normal life. That psychological component matters more than preppers admit. I tested this during a week-long power outage. We were eating from our stockpile, and I broke out a can of butter. The difference in my family's mood was immediate. Suddenly, our rations felt like real meals. Each can contains about 12 ounces of butter. One can cost roughly $8 to $10, depending where you buy it. I keep 20 cans in my stockpile, stored in a cool, dark place. That's about $180, but think about what you're getting. Real butter that requires no refrigeration and will be absolutely impossible to find during shortages. Dairy disappears fast in emergencies. Having real butter means you can still make comfort foods that keep morale high when everything else is falling apart. Food number 6 is psyllium husk powder. Number 6 is going to sound weird until you understand the problem it solves. Psyllium husk powder. You find this in the digestive health section, usually marketed for fiber. But here's what preppers need to understand. When you suddenly switch to a diet of rice, beans, and canned goods, your digestive system goes haywire. Constipation becomes a serious medical problem. In a grid-down situation without modern plumbing, digestive issues can become dangerous fast. Psyllium husk is pure soluble fiber. 1 teaspoon mixed in water daily keeps your digestive system running normally, regardless of diet changes. I learned this the hard way during a 30-day test of my stockpile. By day 10, I was miserable. My neighbor, who's a nurse, suggested psyllium husk. Within 2 days, problem solved. But there's another survival use that's pure genius. Psyllium husk absorbs massive amounts of water and forms a gel. You can use it as a thickener for soups and stews without adding calories. You can even use it as a binder for making survival bread or patties when you don't have eggs. The shelf life is about 2 years in the original container, longer if you transfer it to an airtight jar with a moisture absorber. A 1-pound container costs about $12. That's 6 months to a year supply for one person. I keep 3 containers in my supplies. It's not glamorous, but I guarantee you that maintaining normal digestion during a crisis will be something you're extremely grateful for. Food number 7 is Masa harina. Number 7 is sitting in the international aisle right now, and it's one of the best survival carbs you can store. Masa harina. This is the corn flour used to make tortillas. Not cornmeal, masa harina is different. Here's why this matters. Masa harina has been treated with lime in a process called nixtamalization. This treatment does something incredible. It makes the niacin in corn bioavailable and adds calcium. Regular corn products don't have this. People who lived primarily on regular corn developed pellagra, a nasty deficiency disease. But people who lived on Masa never did. The shelf life in the original bag is about a year, but transfer it to airtight containers with oxygen absorbers and it lasts 5 years or more. Here's the survival advantage. You can make tortillas with just masa harina, water, and a pinch of salt. No yeast, no rising time, no oven needed. Mix it, press it flat, cook it on any heat source for 2 minutes per side. You've got fresh bread. I keep 25 pounds of masa harina in my stockpile. Cost me about $30 total. That's hundreds of tortillas. Tortillas are survival gold because they're portable. You can wrap anything in them, eat them plain, or use them as a utensil to scoop food. Plus, the psychological value of fresh, warm bread during a crisis is huge. During a winter power outage, I made fresh tortillas on our camp stove. The smell of fresh bread filled our cold house, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. That moment of normalcy gave my family hope. Food number 8 is canned mackerel. All right, number 8. And this is one most preppers completely overlook because they're stuck on tuna. Canned mackerel. Before you make a face, listen to the numbers. Mackerel has more omega-3 fatty acids than salmon. It's got more vitamin D than almost any other food. And it costs about half the price of canned salmon. A can of mackerel runs about $2 and provides a full day's worth of vitamin D and omega-3s. The shelf life is 3 to 5 years. I've got cans that are 4 years old, still perfect. Here's why vitamin D matters in a survival scenario. Vitamin D controls your immune system and your mood. In a crisis, especially in winter, you're not getting sunlight. Vitamin D deficiency leads to depression and weakened immunity. Mackerel prevents that. The omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. In a high-stress situation, your body is inflamed. Joint pain, brain fog, even heart problems get worse. Omega-3s counteract this. I started eating canned mackerel twice a week about 2 years ago, and the difference in my joint health was noticeable within a month. For preppers, here's the real advantage. Mackerel is oily fish, so it's packed in its own oils. That means extra calories and healthy fats that your body needs. I keep 50 cans of mackerel in my stockpile. That's about $100 for a food that provides more nutrition per dollar than almost anything else. During shortages, everyone grabs tuna and salmon. Mackerel sits there untouched because people don't know how valuable it is. Food number 9 is TVP, but the unflavored kind. Number 9 is something I mentioned before, but I need to go deeper because most preppers get this wrong. Unflavored textured vegetable protein, TVP. Not the flavored packets, the plain bulk stuff. Here's why the unflavored variety is critical. The flavored versions have added salt and seasonings that reduce shelf life. Plain TVP stored properly lasts 15 to 20 years. This is the same stuff that humanitarian aid organizations use in disaster zones because it's lightweight, shelf-stable, and provides serious protein. 1 pound of dried TVP rehydrates into 3 pounds of protein that has a ground meat texture. The cost is absurd. You can buy a 5-pound bag for about $20. That rehydrates to 15 pounds of usable protein. Compare that to freeze-dried meat at $40 per pound. Here's the preparation secret. Don't just rehydrate it in plain water. Use broth, bouillon, or even just salted water. The TVP absorbs whatever flavor you give it. I rehydrate it in beef broth, and it tastes like ground beef. Use vegetable broth, and it works in vegetarian dishes. I keep 30 pounds of unflavored TVP in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. That's about $120 for the equivalent of 90 pounds of ground meat. In a long-term crisis where fresh meat is impossible to get, having a meat substitute that actually works is going to be invaluable. And because it's so lightweight, it's perfect for bug-out bags too. 1 pound of TVP in your bag equals 3 pounds of protein without the weight. Food number 10 is pickle juice. Number 10 is going to sound insane, but hear me out. Pickle juice, not pickles, the juice itself. And I'm talking about buying extra jars of pickles specifically to have the juice. Here's the science behind this. Pickle juice is loaded with electrolytes, sodium, and potassium. Athletes discovered that drinking pickle juice stops muscle cramps almost instantly. But in a survival situation, electrolyte balance becomes critical. If you're doing physical work, sweating, or dealing with stress, you lose electrolytes fast. Without them, you get weak, dizzy, and your thinking gets foggy. Sports drinks go bad. Electrolyte powders lose potency. But pickle juice lasts as long as the pickles do. Years in a sealed jar. I learned this during a summer power outage. We were working outside trying to clear storm damage. The heat was brutal. I was drinking water, but I felt terrible. My neighbor who runs marathons brought over a jar of pickle juice. I drank half a cup, and within 10 minutes, I felt normal again. Here's the storage strategy. Every time you eat pickles, save the juice in a separate jar and keep it in your stockpile. Or buy cheap jars of pickles specifically for the juice. A gallon of pickle juice costs about $5 if you're buying the pickles. That's dozens of doses of instant electrolyte replacement. I keep about 2 gallons in my prep supplies. It takes up minimal space, costs almost nothing, and could prevent serious health issues during physical crisis situations. Food number 11 is dried mushrooms from Asian markets. Number 11 is one of those foods that experienced survivalists know about, but they don't share. Dried mushrooms, specifically from Asian markets, not the expensive tiny packets from regular grocery stores. I'm talking about the big bags of dried shiitake, wood ear, or oyster mushrooms. Here's what makes these survival gold. Dried mushrooms are one of the only plant sources of vitamin D. When mushrooms are dried in sunlight, they produce vitamin D that remains stable for years. 1 serving of dried shiitake mushrooms contains as much vitamin D as a supplement. The umami flavor is intense. Adding just a few dried mushrooms to any soup, rice, or stew creates this deep, rich, almost meaty flavor. In a situation where you're eating bland rations, this transforms meals. I started buying these after visiting an Asian market and seeing these huge bags for $10. That same amount would cost $50 at a regular grocery store. The shelf life is incredible. Stored in airtight containers, dried mushrooms last 2 to 3 years easily, sometimes longer. To use them, just soak in hot water for 20 minutes. They rehydrate and become tender. Then you can use them like fresh mushrooms. Save the soaking water because it's now mushroom broth, perfect for cooking rice or making soup. I keep about 5 pounds of various dried mushrooms in my stockpile. Cost me about $50 total. That's enough mushrooms to add to hundreds of meals, providing flavor, nutrition, and that vitamin D that's going to be critical if you're stuck indoors for extended periods. Food number 12 is pinto beans, but the specific preparation matters. Number 12. You think you know beans, but let me share something that changed my entire approach. Pinto beans, but here's the secret. Pre-soak and dehydrate them yourself. Here's the problem with regular dried beans. They require hours of cooking, which wastes fuel. But there's a method that almost no preppers use. Buy dried pinto beans in bulk. Soak them overnight until they're swollen and tender. Then spread them on dehydrator trays and dehydrate them completely. What you've got now are pre-cooked beans that rehydrate and cook in 20 minutes instead of 3 hours. This is what backpackers do, but for some reason preppers haven't caught on. The fuel savings over time is massive. In a crisis where fuel is limited, being able to prepare beans in 20 minutes instead of 3 hours could mean the difference between eating hot food or not. I spent one weekend and processed 50 pounds of pinto beans this way. Soaked them, dehydrated them, and now they're stored in buckets. Yes, it took time up front, but now I've got beans that cook fast and still last 10 years in storage. The cost was about $35 for 50 pounds of beans. That's literally thousands of meals. And because they cook faster, they're more practical for everyday use, which means I actually rotate through my stockpile instead of letting it sit forever. Food number 13 is salt, but the right type. Number 13 seems obvious, but most preppers are storing the wrong kind. Salt, specifically sea salt or Himalayan pink salt, not iodized table salt. Here's why this matters. Table salt contains anti-caking agents and additives that can affect long-term storage. Pure sea salt or Himalayan salt is just salt, nothing else. It lasts forever, literally thousands of years. But here's what preppers miss. Salt isn't just for flavoring, it's a preservative. In a long-term crisis, if you hunt or fish, you'll need to preserve meat. Salt is how you do it. Salt is also critical for your nervous system and muscle function. In a high-stress situation with limited diet, salt balance becomes crucial. Too little salt, and you get weak and foggy. I keep 50 pounds of sea salt stored in buckets. It cost about $25. That's enough salt to last my family decades and preserve hundreds of pounds of meat if needed. Here's the kicker. During the last supply chain disruption, regular table salt was available, but sea salt and specialty salts were harder to find. Most people don't think about salt until they run out, and then they panic. Having a massive supply stored means you've got seasoning, preservation, and a critical mineral covered forever. Food number 14 is canned tomato paste. Number 14 is something every prepper should have, but most underestimate. Canned tomato paste. Not sauce, not diced tomatoes, specifically tomato paste. Here's why tomato paste is superior for preppers. It's concentrated, which means more nutrition and flavor in less space. One small can of tomato paste has as much lycopene as 5 fresh tomatoes. Lycopene is a powerful antioxidant that supports heart and immune health. The shelf life is 18 months to 2 years in the can, but here's the trick. Once you open a can, squeeze the rest into ice cube trays and freeze it. Each cube is about 1 tablespoon. Then store the frozen cubes in bags. They last a year frozen, and you can pull out exactly what you need. But why does this matter for prepping? Tomato paste transforms boring foods. Add it to rice for Spanish rice, Mix it into beans for chili. Stir it into soups for depth and richness. It makes everything taste better. I learned this from an Italian friend who told me that during hard times in Italy, families survived on pasta with just tomato paste, olive oil, and salt. That's it, and it was satisfying. I keep 100 small cans of tomato paste. It cost about $50. Each can is less than 50 cents, and each one turns a boring meal into something your family will actually want to eat. The psychological value of food that tastes good during a crisis cannot be overstated. Food number 15 is whole oats, not instant. Number 15, and this is where a lot of preppers make a mistake. Whole oat groats, not instant oatmeal, not even rolled oats. Whole oat groats. Here's the difference. Instant oatmeal has been processed and goes stale within a year. Rolled oats last a bit longer, but whole oat groats stored properly last 30 years. You're getting the same nutrition, but with shelf life that outlasts almost everything else. The problem is that whole oats take longer to cook, about 30 to 40 minutes. But here's the workaround. Soak them overnight in water. In the morning, they're already soft, and you can cook them in 10 minutes. Or eat them cold as muesli. The nutrition is superior to processed oats. You're getting all the fiber, all the vitamins, none of the degradation. Oats are also incredibly versatile. You can grind them into flour, cook them as porridge, use them in soups for thickness, or even sprout them for fresh greens. I keep 100 pounds of whole oat groats in buckets with oxygen absorbers. Cost was about $60. That's enough oats to provide daily breakfast for my family for over a year. And with a 30-year shelf life, it's basically insurance. Compare that to buying instant oatmeal packets that cost 10 times more and go bad in a year. Food number 16 is powdered peanut butter. Number 16 is something that shocked me when I discovered it. Powdered peanut butter. This is peanut butter with most of the oil removed and then ground into powder. You add water to reconstitute it. Here's why this is brilliant for prepping. Regular peanut butter goes rancid. The oils oxidize, and within a year, even sealed jars start tasting off. But powdered peanut butter, stored in airtight containers, lasts 2 to 3 years easily. Some people report 5 years with no issues. The nutrition is solid. It's still got the protein, about 6 grams per serving, and when you add water, it tastes like peanut butter. Not quite as rich because the fat is gone, but in a survival situation, that doesn't matter. Here's the genius part. You can control the consistency. Want peanut butter for sandwiches? Add a little water for thick paste. Want peanut sauce for noodles? Add more water for thin sauce. Want peanut flavor in baking? Just add the powder dry. I keep 10 pounds of powdered peanut butter in my stockpile. It cost about $60. That's the equivalent of 20 jars of regular peanut butter, but with way longer shelf life and more versatility. For kids especially, having peanut butter during a crisis provides comfort. It's familiar, it's filling, and it makes bland bread actually enjoyable. Food number 17 is canned evaporated milk. Number 17, and this one ties everything together. Canned evaporated milk. Not condensed milk with sugar, evaporated milk. Here's why this is the perfect prep dairy. It's shelf stable for 1 to 2 years, sometimes longer. It's real milk with 60% of the water removed, which means concentrated nutrition in a small can. You can reconstitute it with water to drink, or use it straight in cooking for rich, creamy dishes. The versatility is incredible. Use it in coffee, make creamy soups, bake with it, make pudding, or even make yogurt if you got a culture starter. In a crisis where fresh dairy is impossible to get, evaporated milk lets you still make comfort foods. I tested this during a power outage. We made mac and cheese using pasta from storage, powdered cheese sauce, and evaporated milk. It tasted like the real thing. My kids had no idea we were eating from crisis rations. I keep 50 cans of evaporated milk stored in a cool, dark place. It cost about $60. Each can makes the equivalent of about 3 cups of regular milk. That's 150 cups of milk for $60 with no refrigeration needed. During shortages, fresh milk disappears first, then regular shelf-stable milk. Evaporated milk is usually the last to go because most people don't think about it. Here's the bottom line. These 17 foods represent a completely different approach to prepping. While everyone else is buying the same things and creating the same vulnerabilities, you now know foods that are cheaper, store longer, provide better nutrition, and will actually be available when crisis hits. This isn't theory. I've lived through shortages and watched what disappeared versus what stayed on shelves. These 17 items stayed available when everything else was gone. If this information was valuable, smash that like button and subscribe, because next week I'm revealing the biggest mistakes preppers make that could get them killed in the first 72 hours of a collapse. You do not want to miss that. Drop a comment telling me which of these 17 foods you're stocking up on first. I'll see you in the next one.